All right, everyone, this is Nathan Lindorf with The Rational Independent, and today Trump is back in the news cycle, and number one with a bullet on Reddit is an article from The Independent. Headline: Trump says he is about to be arrested again after letter confirms he's target of a January 6th grand jury. So no surprise, the mainstream media continues to push, and the politicized wheels of justice once again set their sights on Donald Trump. The special prosecutor in charge of a grand jury relating to and investigating January 6th and the events that surround it appear to be setting their sights on Donald Trump. It looks like he has, we'll get into the details here in a minute, looks like he has 4 days to respond to the grand jury, at which point he'll either testify before the grand jury or he won't, after which likely he will face additional criminal charges. Once again, this is all on the backdrop of an active presidential election campaign where President Trump is the primary leading opponent, at least according to the polls, opponent of the current president. This is a fairly unprecedented situation in American history that the lines between justice and politics can be so thoroughly blurred. Let's dig into it. Former President Donald Trump revealed on Tuesday that he has been notified by the Department of Justice of his status as a target of the investigation into the January 6th attack, the first real confirmation that he could face criminal charges for his role in the hours-long siege of Capitol Hill. Once again, it's important that we look at the framing, because the language is not unbiased. Language in such reporting is powerful, and the way they frame a conversation is equally powerful. Here, they frame January 6th as an attack, an hours-long siege of Capitol Hill, and point out that Donald Trump had a role in that, and that he's facing criminal charges for his role on the attack. Not a riot, not a protest, not a march, not people that got out of control, none of that. An attack and a siege. These words are chosen with meaning. The article, to their credit, does quote extensively former President Trump's commentary on Truth Social regarding this matter. I struggle with Trump's mannerisms, so I'm not really going to dig into it. If you want to look at it, there it is. Again, it should be noted, I am not a diehard Trump fan. It's no surprise to anyone who pays attention to me. But regardless of whether or not I agree with him, it's important that we pay attention to the role of justice and pay attention to the role of the media in reporting fairly. Impartial is probably a bit of a stretch, but let's go with not mendaciously. Should Mr. Trump face criminal charges related to his efforts to stop Joe Biden's lawful assumption of power? Again, assuming facts, not in evidence, assuming the conclusion that you want. January 6th was an attack and a siege. Joe Biden was a lawful assumption of power. Following his own failure to prove his countless conspiratorial allegations of election fraud, President Trump failed in every judicial effort, every legislative effort, and every executive effort to try and overturn the 2020 election. That doesn't mean that the 2020 election was completely above board. That doesn't mean that there was no fraud. Yes, he failed. However, there's an old saying, and I think it's a useful one, even paranoids have enemies. In other words, you're not crazy if they're actually out to get you. Calling something a conspiracy theory, saying that you have conspiratorial allegations, okay, that should not automatically discredit the idea. It does, and again, the left uses language very particularly. They use language like conspiracy or conspiracy theory to say an idea that's kooky and disproved on the face of it. They say something like racist or white supremacy to say this is a person who is an immoral person and therefore should not be listened to or even argued with. Language has power. You can have election fraud that succeeds, causing the wrong person to assume power. In other words, two things can be true at once. The Democrats can commit fraud, thereby creating an election whose results does not line up with the will of the people. And they can succeed in that fraud and place their candidate in power. Once that's happened, the way the American system is set up, your next opportunity to fix that is 4 years later, basically. And that's the hard truth that President Trump found, is that once the election had been stolen, it was game over. At that point, the wheels grind forward and his opponent takes power. There isn't enough time to adjudicate a faulty election or a stolen election between Election Day and January 20th of the following year. Just can't happen. That's not the way the American system is structured. It's not a parliamentary system, can't call for a vote of no confidence. There's really, your next attempt to remedy that is, one, legislatively fix the things that caused a faulty election in the intervening years, and then hold a valid election. That's the remedy. One of the reasons why I'm not a huge Donald Trump supporter is that that is not a remedy that he's pushed for. He is pushed for personal loyalty to himself as a politician. He is pushed for people to view this as a great slight, as a great offense. He is teaching his followers to be outraged and aggrieved. Outraged politics feeds into the left. It will not lead you to the direction that you want to go. If you want the rule of law, if you want a civil society, even if you like the guy, you cannot agree with the method of saying, avenge me of this wrong that was done to me. That is not a path we want to go down unless you want to find yourself running headlong into tyranny. And I don't care who's at the head of it. I don't want a tyrannical government. Left, right, center. It's a bad idea. Moving on. So, should he face criminal charges related to these efforts? It would be the third criminal indictment to come down on the ex-president's shoulders so far this year. There's an old saying, once is happenstance, twice is coincidence. Once is circumstance, twice is coincidence, three times is enemy action. The fact that 3 different jurisdictions have filed criminal charges, indictments against President Trump in the space of a few months, all of whom have proceedings because there are the people who know how the wheels of justice work, know that there is a timing and a pace to things. If you think it's accidental or just coincidental that these charges were filed against him now, then you're naive. This was done on purpose. And the reason this was done on purpose is because you can get a little splash from an indictment. You'll get a little traction from there, but you're not really going to move the needle. However, what that allows you to do is have hearings, have motions that are filed, have evidence and discovery that comes out, even have some adjudication and perhaps some of this winding up and facing charges, all in the middle of the primary season, all in the middle of this fall as we are getting ready to either pick him as the nominee or not the nominee. They're trying to knock him out of the game. They're trying to retain power. And if you have a very weak candidate, which everybody on the left is weak, frankly speaking, the best political strategy when your field is weak is to make the contest about the other person. If you spend the whole election season campaigning for or against Donald Trump, then the Democrats win. Because then you're not discussing the faults and the failings and the issues of the left, of the Democrats, of their politicians and their representatives. You are relitigating the character of Donald Trump over and over and over again. That is a winning recipe for the left. I need to point something out because it's worth saying and putting on the record. I'm going to quote this. Attorney General Merrick Garland has been typically tight-lipped as the agency's January 6th investigation has progressed in recent months, with Mr. Garland vowing cryptically in one rare instance of commentary on the probe that his prosecutors would follow the evidence wherever it led. The Attorney General serves at the pleasure of the President. He is a member of the executive branch. He does the will of the executive branch, which is embodied by the president. His actions are intrinsically tied to the fate of that presidency. The things Merrick Garland are doing are things that he believes, and the powers that pull his strings believe will increase President Biden's chances in 2024 or whoever replaces Biden. It is audacious when you are someone who is so incredibly politically driven as Merrick Garland is, to make the claim that your investigators will follow the evidence wherever it leads. Because there are many, many instances of your investigators ignoring evidence that is inconvenient to your political party. Merrick Garland would have been a disaster as a Supreme Court president, as a Supreme Court justice. I am so glad that got stopped. But it's not enough to just stand athwart the tracks of history yelling stop. And I didn't come up with that. I think that's the Heritage Foundation's motto, something like that, right-wing think tank. I forget which one. It's not enough to say, Merrick Garland, you don't get to be a Supreme Court justice. Because now he gets to do almost as much damage as an attorney general. It's not enough to just passively resist. If that happens, we lose. It's just a question of how long it takes for that to happen. And last, one small little quirk. Just a factual statement, but we'll give them the final word. There's no statute in the U.S. Constitution that would prevent Mr. Trump from running or even serving as president while under criminal indictment, or even doing so were he to be found guilty. For those of you paying attention to the news on both sides, there is a better than even chance. There's a non-zero chance, let's put it that way. There's a non-zero chance that when it comes time to have the actual presidential election at the end of 2024, that President Trump may either be, that he may be convicted of numerous criminal charges before that election. If you're paying attention to both sides, there's also a non-zero chance that President Biden could be convicted of numerous criminal charges before the next election as well. We may be in a circumstance where not only do we have two of the crummiest people in the country running for office, and our choices are between crummy A and crummy B, but it may be the choices of criminal A or criminal B. That is a real thing that could be the case. I'm going to toss out something just because I'm feeling whimsical. Wouldn't it be more interesting to have Ron DeSantis versus RFK Jr.? Wouldn't that be a more compelling election? Wouldn't that be a better examination of the principles that these two people stand for, that these two parties stand for? It's never going to happen. Who knows? Weird stuff happens. We'll see how it goes. American history is full of amazing interventions and strange events, twists and turns. So we'll follow it as we go along. That's my Reddit rant for today. Good luck out there.